Hey guys, it's Drew again. Today we're going to talk about one of the most colorful people in baseball history. A man that was so revered that he was voted into the Hall of Fame only 1 year after his retirement, and the team that he retired from honored him with a World Series championship rings 4 years after he retired. We're talking about none other than the late, great Casey Stengel. So let's check it out. Today we're going to be talking about Casey Stengel. And Casey Stengel wasn't even his real name. In fact, Charles was his real name. And while Stengel was his last name, he got his nickname Casey because he was from Kansas City, which would be abbreviated KC. And that's just how he was known for all of his life and career. So there's a few different things that are kind of interesting for baseball trivia guys. So if you want a few trivia questions about Casey Stengel being the answer, here's a couple of them. So did you know that Casey Stengel was the first player to hit a World Series home run in Yankee Stadium? Yeah, in 1923, the Giants and the Yankees faced off, and it was the first year of Yankee Stadium. And up till that point, the two teams had shared the polo grounds while Yankee Stadium was being constructed. So this was like the grand show, Babe Ruth and all that stuff to show the world the brand new Yankee Stadium. And in game one, the ninth inning, Casey Stengel for the New York Giants, so actually the visitor, hit an inside the park home run, which actually put the Giants ahead, and they ended up winning game one. In fact, he ended up hitting two home runs in that World Series. Both of them were game-winning home runs. And while he had a great series, the Yankees ended up winning the series and beating the Giants. Another thing is, Casey Stengel is the only person to wear the uniform of all four New York teams while in New York. So as a player, he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He also played for the New York Giants. And of course, as a manager, he managed the New York Yankees through their great dynasty through the 50s, and then, of course, started out with a first manager of the expansion team, the amazing Mets. And in fact, the Mets loved and revered him so much in their fans that even though he would manage them through some terrible years as they first started, he retired in 1965 after breaking his hip. In 1969, the team honored him with a World Series ring, even though he had already been retired from the team with a losing record 4 years earlier. So there's a few things about Casey Stengel. But what I want to talk about is not all the things you know, like his managerial record, the fact that he's the only manager to have 5 consecutive World Series championships with the New York Yankees, 1949 and 1953. What I want to talk about more is on the personal side. So Casey Stengel was married for a very long time to his wife, Edna Stengel. And Edna and Casey were just a great kind of power couple, and they never had any children, and then of course not any grandchildren either, but they were very big into family, and they did have some nieces and nephews. In fact, in 1963, one of their grandnieces, who was only 15 years old at the time, she came and she lived the summer with the Stengels in New York City. Now, of course, in 1963, this is when the New York Mets was at their worst, and so she was there, and she got to see her Uncle Casey, go every day to the ballpark, do his job, and then he would come home, and she would watch him go through the routine. And every night after the game, whether they won or probably lost, he would go for a walk. He would just take a slow walk around the block, and he was out there, and inevitably people would come up and they would want to have autographs, and he would talk to them, and he was just being Casey, you know, smiling, and that wink that he would give. And he would always say, "Come out and see my Metsies, come out and see my Metsies." You know, even though they had lost, and he knew that there wasn't much to see, it was still something to go see. And he was out there promoting his own team. She got to witness this, and she became very, very close to them. Well, about a little more than a decade later, in 1975, Casey Stengel passed away, and his wife, or widow, Edna, and obviously had his entire estate. And what she decided to do was she decided to write down a journal of her relationship with her husband as far as what it was like to be the wife of Casey Stengel. They had been married for many, many decades. And Casey Stengel actually was kind of a collector of baseball things, both for his career and people around him in different points in his career. So in 1978, 3 years after Casey passed away, Edna also passed away. And their grandniece, who was Toni Millette Marsh, she became the executor of Casey Stengel's estate, including all of the things that he had collected. Well, she adored and loved her aunt and uncle, and just cherished the times that that she had with them, and she had this vision that she wanted to do something. She was very close to the Berras, to Yogi Berra and his wife as well, and Yogi Berra had built a small museum in New Jersey about his career and his life. And she really thought it was neat that people could go and see just the different points and parts of Yogi Berra's career. So she wanted to do the same thing. She actually opened up in 2010 in Reno, Nevada, the Casey Stengel Baseball Center. So here's the kind of the thing of why am I telling you all this stuff about Casey Stengel? Well, I actually have a small, very, very small connection to this entire story, or at least the latter part of it. So let me tell you my section of how I came into this. So there was a man that I had met, around 2003 or 4, somewhere around there. And he was a customer of mine in the store that I used to work at. And he and I just hit it off and became kind of friendly and just talking. And he had a very interesting career. He actually was from California originally. And he was a drama teacher, an acting instructor out in UCLA in California. But he had moved out here to Georgia for a number of years. And he had a business where he was a consultant and some other things. He was an author. He had written some books. He was a playwright, screenwriter, and he had quite a list of credit to his name. His name is Rich. And but anyway, Rich and I became, not great friends, but at least good acquaintances. And through this, he found out that I was a big baseball fan. Well, Rich had been approached by Casey Stengel's niece to write a play. She really wanted to document something that she thought would be interesting, but not from his life as a manager or his baseball career, but rather who he was as a person. That year that she spent, that summer that she spent in 1973, witnessing her uncle and her aunt interacting as a married couple, in the light of the fame of New York City, of Casey Stengel and who he was. And she always adored that relationship, and she adored her aunt and how her aunt was the big support for her husband. So what she did was she wanted Rich to write this play, and she actually had lined up a number of things. So Rich was excited about writing this play, but he asked me if I would help, and I'm like, "Are you serious?" So what he did was remember, Rich was not a baseball fan at all. In fact, he didn't know very much about baseball history, but he did know how to write a play. So he started writing a play, and it was about the relationship between Edna and Casey. And what he did was he would give me copies of what he had written, and he wanted me to fact check it. He wanted me to see, was there anything that he was missing as far as how the story collated with Casey Stengel and baseball, rather. And it was kind of neat. I did find a couple of little errors in there. It wasn't a big deal, but he told me that if it ever got published and if it ever got acted out, that he would give me partial credit in it. And I thought, how cool is that? It wasn't like a paid job or anything, but still, to be connected with something was just kind of neat. And it was just a happenstance meeting. Well, one of the things that he had been given by the niece, by Tony, was he was given this journal. He was given a copy of this journal, rather, that Edna had written. Now, remember, after Casey Stengel passed away, Edna wrote a journal about her relationship with her husband throughout the years and what it was like to be his wife. And this journal was actually where a lot of the information that Rich had used for the play. So what he did was he made a copy of it and he gave it to me. And I had this copy. It was a copy of the original journal, but still, it's not like there's lots of these things floating around. And it was really interesting to read because, again, I could see why Rich and I can see why Tony was very interested in reading this journal because it talked about the relationship, what it was like when he would come home and try to be upbeat for the fans and upbeat for the media and upbeat for the team. But man, they lost a lot of games for the Mets, and it was such a different contrast compared to what he was used to when he managed the Yankees, and they just couldn't lose, it seemed. So it was kind of an interesting thing, and the play, unfortunately, was never picked up. It had gotten all the way to the end, but it was never picked up by the investors to be able to be produced and put on stage. But still, I still have a copy digitally of the play, and it's kind of neat. I can go back and read it. But unfortunately, I can't find that manuscript. I cannot find that journal. I have looked and looked and looked in my house, in this room. I've looked and I cannot find it. I hope it didn't get thrown away because I'll never get another copy. Rich is long gone. I haven't talked to him in, I don't know, probably 13, 14 years. I have no idea. He moved back to California. He's back being a professor of theater and acting. And you can still look him up if you want to. His name is Rich Crevolin. And anyway, it was kind of interesting. It was really a neat thing. But what he did do was in 2010, when this career center opened up, he went to it and he wanted to give me something just as a personal thanks, as a friendship. And this is not a big deal, but it is a reminder of something. And what this is everybody was given this little postcard. And this little postcard, it says the Casey Stengel Baseball Center. It's got a little pin attached to it. You can kind of see it. And there is the back of it. And so this, again, is not a very valuable piece or anything, but it's really kind of neat. It's a connection not only to Casey Stengel, to his legacy, but more than that. It's a connection to his widow. It's a connection to his family, and it's a connection to how he is loved and revered looking back. Look into Casey Stengel's life. Look into some of the things that he did, that he said. And he's really an interesting character. He's more than just the manager of the Yankees when they won all those World Series through the 50s. But some of the things that he went through, both the negativity and all the glory, and just a great man. And as Tony would say, she loved her Uncle Casey and Aunt Edna. And you just never look at him, but he kind of thinks like, yeah, I wish Casey Stengel was my uncle too. Anyway, thanks for coming along with this story today. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, you guys be good.